Folks, this is so stunning and ridiculous and disgusting. I felt like you needed to see it ASAP. The Fox propaganda network is so committed to getting Donald Trump elected that they're actually dedicating time on air to defend and launder and sanitize Trump's admiration of Adolf Hitler. Even as bombshell new reporting goes into more vivid detail about how much Trump admires Hitler. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, got several clips to show you here. This is stunning stuff. I want to give you some context, though, before I show you this morning's clip from Fox and Friends, in which you see a somewhat visibly uncomfortable but committed Brian Kilmeade defend this crap. Here's the context. So there was a new report from The Atlantic going into detail about Donald Trump's admiration for Hitler. So I want to read you the relevant excerpt. In their book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, Peter Baker and Susan Glasser reported that Trump asked John Kelly, his chief of staff at the time, and a former general, note that name because he's going to come back into this, that Trump said, quote, "Why can't you be like the German generals?" Trump at various points had grown frustrated with military officials he deemed disloyal and disobedient. Throughout the course of his presidency, Trump referred to flag officers as "my generals." According to Baker and Glasser, Kelly explained to Trump that German generals, quote, "tried to kill Hitler 3 times and almost pulled it off." This correction did not move Trump to reconsider his view. No. They were totally loyal to him, the president responded. This week, I, the author of the Atlantic article, asked Kelly about their exchange. He told me that when Trump raised the subject of German generals, Kelly responded by saying, "Do you mean Bismarck's generals?" referring to Otto von Bismarck. He went on, "I mean, I know he didn't know who Bismarck was or about the Franco-Prussian War." I said, "Do you mean the Kaiser's generals? Surely you can't mean Hitler's generals." And then he, Trump, said, yeah, Hitler's generals. I explained to him that Rommel had to commit suicide after taking part in a plot against Hitler. Kelly told me Trump was not acquainted with Rommel, the Desert Fox, Erwin Rommel, legendary Nazi general. I mean, Trump's ignorance of history is staggering. But more importantly, more staggeringly, is the commitment Trump has to this idea that he should be Hitler-esque, that he should invoke a Hitler level, a Hitlerian cultish devotion in the people under him. Again, obviously the facts show that many of his top generals tried to kill him at various points. So again, I don't think the metaphor works. But Trump associates Hitler with greatness, which shouldn't surprise anyone given his praise for Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban. It's totally commensurate with Trump's other public statements about foreign autocrats and fascists. As stunning as that all is, this is how Fox and Friends tried to defend, launder, and sanitize Trump's obsession with Hitler.
Absolutely. So, the opinion on this, I saw this coming. You know, I've said this for about a year.
Yeah, you did call this.
So I read H.R. McMaster's book. I thought that was going to be it. I find him unbelievably insightful and smart. I read his book. And you know what he did as national security advisor? He spent the whole time dealing with Mattis and Kelly, who I also like and have huge respect for, who didn't like the president, thought he was incompetent and not capable of doing the job. And they thought it was their job to rein him in. McMaster said, even though he's a 3-star, telling 4 stars, and said, we're civilians now, that's not your job. Your job is not to rein in the president. Your job is to give him the best advice possible and do what he said. Play this out. So if your general, who's your chief of staff, and your secretary of defense is not doing what you say on an everyday basis, he's like, I could see him going, I love generals that listened. That would be great. Right. And he's also from a world where his company is huge, but it's a family company. Mm-hmm. So when he asked Eric or somebody to do.
So there's so many issues with this. Again, Brian Kilmeade, you can tell he's visibly uncomfortable, but he's committed to trying to defend Trump in this just bombshell recent reporting. It would be one thing if Trump said, I want loyal generals. Although that in and of itself has implications because your generals are supposed to report to you, but they're supposed to be loyal to the Constitution first and foremost. Again, you contrast this with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has a sovereign. It has a monarch. You know, the royal armed forces of Great Britain swear allegiance to the crown, to the monarch, to King Charles. That's who they swear allegiance to. American soldiers pledge allegiance to the Constitution. The president is merely their commanding officer. So even if Trump said, I want loyal generals in the sense who will just blindly follow orders irrespective of their legality, that would be problematic. But that's not even what he said. He said he wants German generals, Hitler's generals. So Brian Kilmeade is being incredibly disingenuous, to say nothing of the fact that General Mattis, as Secretary of Defense, and John Kelly, as White House Chief of Staff, both of those positions serve at the pleasure of the president. So if you really believed, Donald, as President of the United States, that they were being disobedient, you could have fired them. You could have fired them. You didn't need Nancy Pelosi. This is Trump's problem. Anything that Trump had the power to do and wield responsibly, he would always blame on somebody else for not having done it, right? When January 6th occurred and it was Trump's responsibility, his unique responsibility to deploy the National Guard, he blamed Nancy Pelosi for it, even though Nancy Pelosi does not exist in the chain of command related to the National Guard and has no authority to stop Trump or the National Guard. That's how Trump, that's another reason why, even if you like Trump's policies, the man is so stupid and so unable to efficiently wield power. Why would you trust him to get anything done? Stupid, incoherent stuff, to say nothing of the despicableness of trying to launder and sanitize Trump's obsession with Hitler and wanting to emulate Hitler. Really gross of Brian Kilmeade. Speaking of John Kelly, the chief of staff in question, former general, there was also some blockbuster New York Times reporting, which included audio of General Kelly that released about the same time at this Atlantic article. And I want to play you a clip. It's audio, but since Caitlin Collins on CNN is throwing it up on screen, it actually has some nice visual.
Now, this is all coming as Kelly, during these interviews, is also confirming reports that Trump has made admiring statements about Hitler.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that.
What would he say when you would lay that out to him?
He'd just, that'd be the end of the conversation usually.
That was his chief of staff. Again, it's important to remember the chief of staff, that's not a minor role. The chief of staff is not, the vice president is technically the second highest ranking person in the executive branch, but the chief of staff is arguably the second most powerful role in the federal government because they're the ones responsible for executing the president's agenda, right? They work with and are typically seen as superior to the cabinet, right? This is basically the hand of the king, to use a Game of Thrones metaphor. Now, they're outside the presidential line of succession, so there's no way a chief of staff can become president, but they are basically the hand of the king. It's an enormously powerful position. Many people view it as the prime minister. So for a guy in that position under Trump to say these things, it's staggering. And you should look at the New York Times report itself. Again, we're not going to get into it. Kelly, for some reason, is doing these interviews. He's even going on the record. We have the audio now. It's not just quotes. We have audio from Kelly himself. Unfortunately, he has not taken that next step of throwing a camera in front of him and alongside Generals Mark Milley and General Mattis, stepping up and actually making the case against Trump. It's really disappointing that they're not doing that. But folks, the quotes here, the audio is staggering. He calls Trump a fascist, much like Mark Milley, much like Mattis implies he is. These are coming from people who are not rhinos. They're coming from storied veterans, people who nobly served this country in uniform, something Republicans used to care about, or at least would say they cared about. Obviously, they don't, because devotion to Trump trumps, pun intended, your loyalty and your service to your country. So if you're a veteran, if you're a storied veteran, if you're a veteran who served Trump loyally, if you're a combat veteran, if you were wounded, none of that matters if what you do is criticize Trump. All of that goes out the window. It's irrelevant. And that's where Kelly finds himself, because most Trump supporters won't care about this, but some might. And some, Nikki Haley style, quasi never Trumpers, or, people who are double haters, they might find this persuasive. The fact that people who know Trump far better than the vast majority of his sycophants and voters are saying, yeah, this guy's a fascist and he was obsessed with Hitler and he wanted to emulate Hitler. Pretty staggering, despicable stuff. We'll probably do another video going into more detail. This was, I suppose, in many ways more about the depths to which Fox was willing to sink to launder and sanitize. It'd be bad enough if they ignored this, but they didn't ignore it. They addressed it head on and actually tried to defend it. Incredibly despicable stuff from a despicable network. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.